Hi everyone, and welcome back to Aleph Academy. My name is Kieran and I'm a front-end engineer here at Aleph. Today, I'm going to be highlighting a few key technologies that are shaping the front-end space to supercharge web app development. When it comes to web development, it's important to understand that it is an ever-growing, ever-evolving space. One day is all it can take to change the landscape and outlook of how we can best approach our practices in web development. Here at Aleph, we embrace this constant change to deliver the best experience for the users. Let's start with the first key technology in web development today, server-side rendering, also known as SSR. Server-side rendering is typically referred to around frameworks such as Next.js, Nuxt, and maybe even Gatsby. SSR does what it says. It handles all the rendering on the server, which means the client will have less load burden. By managing the rendering on the server, the search engines don't need to wait for JavaScript and CSS to run before indexing, as the SSR has done that for them. Not just benefiting the search engines, but users will experience much faster initial load times as they too do not need to run the JavaScript on their machines. This is even more prominent for those on older machines or when dealing with slower internet connections. In comparison to a client-side rendered application, server-side rendering will typically decrease initial load times by 1 to 1.5 seconds, and that's without any additional code optimizations. In most cases, this is due to the total blocking time being reduced by the rendering being done on the server prior. Not only is SSR quick, it enables us to evaluate how a user traverses the web application, as the SSR app lets the server know where the user is going. This, in turn, gives us valuable information on how we can improve the user interface and the user experience as a whole. On the other hand, SSR is not always necessary or even the correct fit. SSR puts a lot of load onto the server, so it is important to make sure that the server is powerful enough to handle the SSR of the application. Scaling of an SSR app ultimately comes down to the size of the infrastructure and its cost. In some cases, you might want the extra flexibility not to be tied down to a specific framework. Maybe there is no business requirement for good SEO, much like an intranet or an enterprise resource planning system. In this case, a normal client-side rendered application can do the trick. Next up, I'd like to talk about how front-end developers are now able to utilize composable Saas offerings. Firstly, let's talk about hosting. Gone are the days where you need to struggle with setting up a complex architecture from scratch. Now we have services like Firebase and Vercel, of which we can have our web app deployed to a URL in minutes with minimal setup. With Firebase, create your project on Firebase, initialize it in your code base, and then run Firebase deploy to deploy your code to the project you created. With Vercel, it's as easy as adding your Bitbucket or GitHub repo as a project in a dashboard. Then once you push any code to any branch, it will trigger a deploy to a URL instantly. Now we have serverless functions. Serverless functions are a cloud computing service that allows a developer to run code without needing to manage some underlying infrastructure. Most cloud service providers offer a serverless platform, such as AWS Lambda, Azure Functions, and Vercel, to name just a few. You may or may not have heard of a term closely related to serverless functions called edge functions. An edge function is a type of serverless function. It runs closer to the client devices, which in turn gives you lower latency on the code being run. Here at Aleph, we utilize serverless functions to run a piece of smart contract code for generating an NFT for our Alephians in 2022. The total development and integration time was under 2 weeks. Composable Saas enabled us to do rapid prototyping without the worry of setting up server infrastructure, and we could keep our development team lean. Typically with serverless or edge functions, you are creating some APIs to call a database for information. In today's development world, setting up a database, whether it's MySQL, MongoDB, or even a headless CMS, it is a much, much easier task than a few years ago. Most cloud platforms provide almost instant access to a database, which is secure and configurable through their platform interfaces. For me as a front-end developer, I feel that setting up a database now is just as simple as bootstrapping a React application with the tools available to us. Something that is a real game changer in this topic is Vercel Storage, which was announced earlier this month. Vercel is known for being a front-end cloud service provider, and by adding Vercel Storage to their services, they have empowered front-end developers to spin up serverless data storage, which meets their needs within a few clicks. A service like this is going to speed up our development time, whilst keeping our architecture composable. I briefly mentioned headless CMS as a storage method, and I want to touch on what the future is bringing us with headless CMS integrations. Vercel also announced during their ship event that they are bringing direct visual editing within their preview branches when it comes to content editing with headless CMSs. So let's imagine for a minute. You're a front-end developer. You've developed a really cool-looking homepage. It's integrated with your favorite headless CMS and serving the content from it. You submit your code for review, and it becomes a preview link for your designers or your project manager to see before it goes live. Now they notice the content isn't quite right. They will now have the capability to edit that content directly in the web application by clicking on the elements, and then it will submit the edit directly to the CMS you're using. With an integration like this, Vercel are making a composable architecture way more accessible, and it's likely that other service providers will follow that suit. For the last emerging technology in the front-end space, I want to talk about something that has not only changed my way of working, but also elevated it, and that is GitHub Copilot. GitHub Copilot is an AI pair programming tool that can sit inside your VS Code and help you to discover new code as you type. It will suggest code based on a variety of different variables. It could be based off of your file name, your component name, any data you've imported. It can recognize your interfaces when you're writing in TypeScript and suggest code based around that structure. If you're struggling with certain logic, or you just want to speed up typing something, just start typing a comment of what you want GitHub Copilot to suggest for you and press enter. I'd like to show you guys some of this in action, so let's bring up my IDE for you. So here I am in a typical utility file, and I want to create a use media query hook to check for screen size changes. I'm going to start with export const use media query, and I'm going to press tab to fill that out, and I'm going to wait a second, and then I'm going to press tab for that too. Okay, cool. Did you blink? What you just saw was GitHub Copilot suggesting the code for me. It set up the use effect for me and returns a Boolean value for me. Now let's use this hook to see that it actually works. I'm going to import my media query hook. And look, Copilot knows what to do already. So I'll press tab to fill that in. And I'm going to fill in a little JSX here to show something in the browser when I resize, to check if the hook is actually working. And there we have it. Copilot has helped me write a hook. And I did not have to write more than a few lines of code myself, which was just some imports and a small amount of JSX. Let's take this a step further. What I'm going to do here now is let GitHub Copilot write an entire component for me. I'm going to trust its output. I'm going to import React from React. I'm going to find my interface prompt by entering a couple of times, and I'm going to let it fill that out. Now it knows it needs to be a button component based on the file name at the top. So I'm going to press tab and keep tabbing to fill out the entire button component. I think that's good, so I'm going to save and import it into my page component to show the final result. Again, Copilot knows what to do. I just need to import the button and return it in the JSX. There we go, a styled, complete button component. From here in a real-world scenario, I can modify and adjust styling when necessary, with Copilot giving me great suggestions along the way. Now to close the loop, let's get Copilot to do one thing that we should be doing way more of as front-end developers, which is writing tests. In this button test file, I'm going to import React from React. Now it knows it's a test file, and it's suggesting Enzyme, which is great, but I want to use React testing library. So I'm going to start typing functions related to that library instead, and it modifies its prompt for me. It knows to import the button component. And now it's going to start writing tests. I think I want more than one test, so I'm going to give it some space to write more than one test. And there we go. Now let me tidy this up so it's functional code with a few closing brackets. From these few demos, it's clear that GitHub Copilot really can help a developer get code down fast and efficiently. And in some cases, it can elevate the code output. One part of the demo in particular, though, felt like it lacked a bit of quality that we might want to aim for. I'm talking about the tests that it just wrote for me. When I'm coding, I'm not sure how I can better my code, but I know it can be written in an alternative way. Before I go and bother a more senior developer, I look for another tool, and that tool being ChatGPT, which is, as you may know, an AI chatbot built by OpenAI. Let me show you how I use ChatGPT. Let me prompt ChatGPT first by letting it know that I have a button component, and I have some tests, and I want to improve the tests I've written. I'll also let it know that I'm going to provide it with the code snippets. Okay, great. Chat is active and waiting for my code snippets. So let's copy the button component over and paste it in. Okay, it recognizes that was the button component. Now let's provide it with the tests. Now this is exactly what I need. ChatGPT has given me a few pointers on how I can improve my test writing with meaningful assertions, adding a test button click event, and improving the test descriptions. In the same message, it has also provided me with a code snippet, which shows those improvements directly to me, along with a brief description of the code snippet. With ChatGPT and Copilot together, I find it to be a perfect pair of pair programmers. Over the last 9 months, I've been able to discover code that I would never have used before. It's given me a boost of confidence in the code that I'm writing, and it has increased my delivery speed significantly. I hope you enjoyed my Academy session and are empowered to supercharge your web app development. For more powerful content on engineering and design, subscribe to our YouTube channel and tune in for future Academy sessions. Thank you, and see you next time.